Today, we're going to take a look at the new Avastar binding panel. Now, of course, your meshes and your rig must be prepared before you can actually bind them. But that's a big topic on its own, and it really deserves its own video. For now, we'll just use some ready-prepared items and focus on the panel itself. I'll show you how Avastar's bind tool can make your life a whole lot easier, especially compared to Blender's default binding features. Alright, let's dive right in. I'm using the Shaolin mesh, which was published on BlendSwap many years ago, and which I also used for an old video tutorial way back in 2014. As you can see, this mesh isn't in the original Second Life T-pose. So first, we need to prepare the armature to make it ready for the job. Actually, I've already set up an Avastar rig that we will now use for the binding. I already have posed the rig to match with this mesh. As mentioned before, I won't go into the details here how I got to this pose. But honestly, how the pose was created is mostly irrelevant for what comes next. All we need to know for now is that we have to convert this pose into a Second Life compatible bind pose. First, we make sure the rig is selected and in pose mode. Then we open the posing panel and set bone constraints to visible bones. Next, in the rig display, we select only the torso, arms, and legs, and we also make sure that only the animation bones are active. Now we head back to the posing panel, scroll down to the Rig Modify Tools section, and call the as Bind Pose operator. Using the Bind Pose option here is in most cases the best option when working with humanoid meshes. It works perfectly for this model too. And yes, I can already see the need for another video to properly talk about bind poses, joint edits, and the Second Life rig in general. But enough of that for now. Let's move forward. Once the operator has finished, let's quickly check that the pose has indeed become the new rig rest pose. We can see that easily when we switch between pose position and rest position. All is well when we see no differences. Now, let's take a look at the mesh. First thing we notice, it has no weight groups defined. Well, yeah, and that's another video we'll have to make. Looks like there are plenty more coming up soon. But don't worry, we're almost there. Let's open the binding panel. Since we've only selected a mesh so far, the binding panel isn't too happy yet. It's asking for an armature. But here's a neat little touch. The panel actually offers you a list of available armatures to choose from. Since we only have one armature in the scene, it's a no-brainer. You just pick it right there in the panel. And voila! As soon as both the mesh and the armature are selected, the binding panel springs to life. Now, let's do a quick checkup. We have the armature, great. We have the mesh, super. But there's nothing else. So how are we supposed to bind? The panel even throws us a red warning. No weighted meshes in the scene. And here's where the weighting method comes into play. We change it from copy from meshes to automatic from bones. This setting will automatically generate weight maps based on the bone setup. You'll also notice it says weights will be generated from 23 deformed bones. Those are exactly the bones we prepared earlier when we filtered for just the torso, arms, and legs. So let's click Bind to Armature, wait a second or two, and ta-da! Oh, nothing changed? No, a lot has changed, and the fact that you don't see anything different yet is actually a great sign. Let's check what happened. Select the mesh and look at the vertex groups. And there they are. The 23 promised weight maps now neatly set up as vertex groups. Again, that's a whole new topic for another video. But for now, having the weights properly in place is exactly what we want. All right, let's select the armature and see. And now we can pose the armature, and the mesh follows. We're done. The rest would be fine-tuning the animation data. And yes, there's our next video spotted already. So to sum it up, We've now bound a mesh by generating its weight maps from the rig setup. Now you might ask, why should I use the Avastar binding panel? After all, Blender has its own binding tools. Well, the point is, we tried to streamline the whole process and add some handy shortcuts into the workflow. For example, Blender always generates weights for all deformed bones, while Avastar lets you specify exactly which bones you want weights for. And that's just one difference. But let's keep it tight for now. In the next part, we'll take a look at binding with copy from meshes. In this setup, we've got the Shaolin model again, already bound to the armature. So far, so good. But when you move the pose bones around, you'll notice something odd. There's a second model in the scene, just standing there. Now, this one's an exact copy of the original, but it's not bound to the rig at all. No weight maps, no connection to the bones, just a very convincing imposter. Let's sort that out. This time, instead of generating new weights from the bones, we'll take a shortcut and copy the weights from the mesh that's already working properly. But the moment we change the bind method, Avastar has another little complaint. This time, it's missing a weight source. That is, a mesh that already has weight maps assigned, so it knows where to copy the weights from. And without that, the bind to armature button stays stubbornly grayed out. So, what now? Well, luckily we do have a weight source. It's the already bound Shaolin mesh right here in the scene. We just need to select it from the widget list in the panel. And now we can bind. And, as before, it may look like nothing happened. But in fact, both Shaolin meshes are now bound to the armature. And just like that, we're done. All is well in the land of bindings. But wait, there's more. Let's unbind one of the meshes again. Now this mesh is no longer connected to the armature, but it still holds onto its weight maps. So it's basically ready to jump back in at a moment's notice. Now let's unbind the other mesh, but this time we'll make sure the weight maps get removed in the process. So what do we have now? Neither mesh is bound to the rig anymore. But one of them still carries weight maps, while the other is completely clean, no weights at all. And now comes the interesting bit. We want to rebind the pure mesh, the one with no weights, but instead of generating new weights, we'll reuse the weights from the other unbound mesh. Yes, even though it's not bound to the armature anymore, it still makes the perfect weight source. So, how do we do this? Easy peasy. First, select the armature and the mesh you want to bind. Then, in the widget list, choose the other mesh, the one that still has the weight maps. Click the Bind to Armature button, and that's it. Mischief accomplished. The mesh is bound again. What we're seeing here is a handy little upgrade in Avastar 4. We can now copy weights from other meshes, even if they're no longer bound to the armature. As long as they've still got weight maps, they're fair game as a source.
Well, there's a hell rider lurking on this road. One specific situation where copying weights from an unbound mesh will take you straight down. No breaks, no mercy, and yes, it is nasty. But hey, let's make this a bit of a challenge. I won't tell you what it is just yet. Just this. The issue is known, and the cure is right there in the binding panel, waiting for those who know where to look. So go on. Figure it out, if you dare.
Until then, happy binding, and have a great day. Oh my gosh. Where is the transcript again? Darn. I need coffee. I need coffee. Someone? Aha, here it is. Oops. Oh, the mic is still on. Oh my God.